right. So you're starting to loosen up a little bit. That's good. You're up and down on your feet. We're going to give you another opportunity to get up and down on your feet. I do want to just say hello to Senator Shaheen, who just walked in, by the way. We're going to hear from her very shortly. Let me now, at this point, welcome our friend and a friend of working men and women, a friend of the values that we embrace as a labor movement, Senator Bernie Sanders, who was born in Brooklyn, the younger of two sons. After graduation from the University of Chicago, he moved to Vermont. He was elected, and I was talking to Jan Justice, who lived up there for a number of years, was elected mayor of Burlington by 10 votes in 1981. Imagine the difference that 10 votes can make. So if you don't think getting to the polls in November of 2014 isn't important, this was 10 votes that put this political career into action. He has been a champion on all kinds of issues, but most importantly, he's been a champion on fairness, on equity, on making sure that people get a fair shake, and he will take on anybody and fight against anybody who tries to undermine the middle class in this country. Keep hope alive, Bernie Sanders, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Brothers and sisters, thank you very much for inviting me to be with you this morning as we celebrate Labor Day. And I want to thank Mark and Kurt and Jan and all of the folks at the New Hampshire AFL-CIO. More importantly, let me thank each and every member here and trade unionists all over this country who today, who yesterday, and decades past have put their lives on the line, have stood up and fought for the rights of working people. And I want to thank you very much for that. It is no secret right now that the billionaire class and the big money interests are targeting organized labor. And the reason for that is they understand that when workers can come together and bargain collectively, they can earn decent wages. They can have a voice in our democracy. And the billionaires see you as their strongest opposition. And thank you very much for being just that. Our job is to not only fight back against all of those people who want to destroy the trade union movement. Our job is to grow the trade union movement and make sure that every worker in this country who wants to be in a union can be in a union. I also want to thank all of you in this room for sending Jeanne Shaheen to the United States Senate. I am proud and honored to be the chairman of the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, and I want to tell you, there are very few people in the United States Congress who fight harder for the men and women who put their lives on the line to defend us than Jeanne Shaheen. Please send her back to Washington. Custer and Carol Shea Porter and Governor Hassan the best of luck in their re-election efforts. The main point that I want to make this morning, being as honest and as straightforward as I can with you, is to tell you that this country faces enormously difficult problems. And I would be dishonest to try to push these problems underneath the rug. And I would be dishonest if I did not tell you that, in my view, The problems that we face today are probably more serious than at any time since the Great Depression. And if you throw in the international planetary crisis of climate change, they may be even more serious. That's the reality. And if this country is going to go forward, we have got to have the courage to look these problems straightforwardly, analyze them, and bring people together to solve them. From the bottom of my heart, I believe that these problems, in fact, are solvable, but they will not be solved unless working people come together and have the courage to take on the greed and the selfishness that we're seeing all over this country. Now let me briefly just review where we are economically, and all of you know it. And Governor Hassan touched on some of these issues. But let me be blunt and tell you what many of you already know. In a nutshell, the great middle class of this country, once the envy of the entire world, is disappearing. And our job is to rebuild that disappearing middle class. My family has the same story that millions of families have in this country. My dad came to this country at the age of 17 without a nickel in his pocket. And he never made a whole lot of money, but he worked his entire life, was able to send 2 kids to college. Our vision today is that every kid in this country should have the right to go to college, regardless of the income of his or her family. That people who work hard are entitled to earn decent wages. And that the wealth of this country should be fairly distributed, not going just to the top 1%. Today in America, we have more people living in poverty than any time in the history of this country. At 22%, we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth. And despite the modest successes of the Affordable Care Act, we still have 40 million people in this country without health insurance, and we remain the only nation in the industrialized world that does not guarantee health care as a right, and we have got to change that. Now, there are a lot of angry people out there, and you see them on TV a lot of the times. Unfortunately, many of them are angry at the wrong people for the wrong reason. But whether you're in the Occupy Wall Street movement, or whether you're in the Tea Party movement and you're a conservative, you have a right to be angry given what's happening in the economy today. Today, despite a revolution in technology, which has made every worker in America more productive, the fact of the matter is that the standard of living for working people continues to decline. Since 1999, the typical American family, that family right in the middle, has seen a decline in income by over $5,000. Incredibly, that family today earns less income than it did 25 years ago. So you want to know why people are angry? They're out there working long hours for low wages. Women are working, men are working. Go to the high schools, you find kids are working. They're working desperately hard, and they're getting nowhere in a hurry. And that is not where America should be. Yes, clearly, and not enough people know this, we are a lot better off than we were when George W. Bush left office, when 700,000 people a month were losing their jobs, and the American and international financial system were on the verge of collapse. Yes, we are better off because we're creating jobs. But nobody in this room believes that we are anywhere near where we ought to be. The fact of the matter is that most of the new jobs created since the Great Recession are low-wage jobs, they are part-time jobs, and in fact, they pay 23% less than the jobs we lost during the Wall Street collapse era. Now, here's something that I think all of you know. When you pick up the papers in the morning, they tell you that unemployment in America, official unemployment, is 6.1%. That's official unemployment. Real unemployment, including those people who have given up looking for work, or those people who are working part-time when they want to work full-time, you know what that number is? It is 12%. Youth unemployment, we don't talk about this at all. Youth unemployment today, the kids who are graduating high school, kids who have dropped out of high school, is 20%. Now, many of you have paid attention. Seen on TV what went on in Ferguson, Missouri, where an unarmed African-American youth was shot. What you don't know is that African-American youth unemployment is 35%. And in the St. Louis area, it's actually higher than that. We have got to put the American people back to work. And the federal government has got to step up to the plate with a massive federal jobs program rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. And I'm glad to see New Hampshire's doing something. I know Vermont is. But unless I'm mistaken, the governor would tell you could use a little bit more federal help. You bet. And she says you bet. She's right. I want to touch on another issue when we talk about the economy, and I have to tell you, this is not an issue you see discussed on TV too much, and you don't see a whole lot of people talking about it, but we have to be honest about it. Since 2001, hold on to your hats, since 2001 in New Hampshire, in Vermont, and all across this country, we have seen the loss of over 60,000 factories. 60,000 factories and millions of decent paying jobs. And in my view, one, not the only, but one of the reasons for that is a disastrous trade policy, NAFTA, CAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China. A trade policy which has said to corporate America, here it is, you shut down plants in America, you don't have to pay workers here 15, 20 bucks an hour, you can go to China, hire people for $1 or $2 an hour. I am proud to tell you that I have never voted for one of these trade agreements, and I was right. I'm trying to, and they certainly deserve it. Now, to understand the American economy today, you can capsulize it in one way. Not so many years ago, really not so many, the largest private sector employer in the United States was a company called General Motors. And General Motors produced real products, automobiles. They work with good unions like the UAW. They paid their workers good wages and good benefits. That was the American economy then. Today, the largest private sector employer in America is Walmart's. Walmart pays wages that are so low that the people in this room end up subsidizing Walmart because many of their workers can't make it on the wages they receive, and they have to go on Medicaid, food stamps, and affordable housing paid for by the government. The owner of Walmart's is the Walton family, the largest the most wealthy family in America. In my view, the wealthiest family in America does not need welfare from the middle class in this country. Let them pay their workers a living wage. In terms of education, in a highly competitive global economy where we need the best educated workforce in the world, right now, as the governor indicated, college is increasingly unaffordable. We have hundreds of thousands of bright young people who have so much to add to our country, they can't afford to go to college. And other kids who are going to college are leaving school $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 in debt. I recently met with a young woman who graduated medical school. She has $300,000 in debt. We need to make certain that every person, and not just young people, every person in this country who needs a higher education should be able to get that education regardless of the income of his or her family. Look, here's the reality. The fact of the matter is that in America today, tens of millions of families are struggling hard to put food on the table. They are worried whether or not they're going to have the money to put gas in their car so they can get to work, because if they don't get to work or they lose their jobs, they don't know what's going to happen to their kids. That's the economic reality facing this country. Middle class disappearing. But what the American people also understand, and I think what really gnaws people, really hurts people, is they understand that something else is going on in the country. And that is that while the middle class shrinks, and so many of our people are living in poverty, the people on top are doing phenomenally well, and the largest corporations in this country are enjoying record-breaking profits. Now let me tell you something that, again, you don't hear much in the media about. When we talk about distribution of wealth, what that means is at the end of your work life, what do you have? What do you own? In terms of distribution of wealth, our country today has the most unequal distribution of wealth of any major country on earth, and worse today than at any time since 1928. Today, listen to this, the top 1% owns about 37% of all wealth in America. Who wants to guess what the bottom 60% of the American people own? What's your guess? The answer is 1.7%. Let me say that again. Top 1% owns 37% of the wealth in America. The bottom 60%, everybody in this room together, owns 1.7% of the wealth. The top 1/10 of 1%, 13,000 families, own over 23% of the wealth in America. That, brothers and sisters, is not what America is supposed to be about. We're a democracy, not an oligarchy. Today, the Walton family, one family, owns more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American people. In terms of income, that is what we make every single year. The last statistics that we have tell us that 95% of all new income generated. Have we seen some recovery in recent years? Yes, we have. But the truth is that for the middle class, it doesn't matter much whether growth is 2%, 3%, 4%, because 95% of all new income generated since the Wall Street crash goes to the top 1%. Brothers and sisters, we have got to do a little bit better than that. Working families deserve a piece of the action. Everybody in this room is concerned about education. We're concerned that in Vermont, all over this country, teachers have been laid off because local school districts don't have the money to pay them. Understand that last year, the 24 most lucrative hedge fund managers made more income than 425,000 public school teachers. That makes sense to nobody that I know. Now, I've laid out some of the problems. Let me briefly tell you what I think we've got to do. If we had a Congress that has the guts to represent working families and not just billionaires, the first thing we have to do, and I think Gene Shaheen knows something about this, is we have got to overturn this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. And no matter what issue you are concerned with, you're interested in women's rights, you're interested in health care, education, job creation, you must be concerned that a handful of billionaires, Koch brothers, Sheldon Adelson, and others, now are capable of spending and are spending hundreds of millions of dollars to elect candidates whose sole function in life is to make the wealthiest people even wealthier. That is not the democracy that men and women fought and died for. We've got to overturn Citizens United and, in my view, move toward public funding of elections so everybody has a chance to run for office. As I mentioned a moment ago, if we're serious about creating jobs, we listen to the American Society of Civil Engineers. What these guys tell us is we need to invest $3 trillion in roads, bridges, water plants, wastewater plants, our rail system, older schools. When we make that investment, and when we transform our energy system away from fossil fuel and deal with the crisis of climate change, you know what else we do? We create millions of decent paying jobs. That should be a top priority for a Congress that cares about working people. And when we talk about the economy, clearly we all understand that the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour is not a minimum wage, it's a starvation wage. We've got to raise the minimum wage to a living wage. You know, one of the current phenomena, and honestly, I do not understand it. One would think that if you were the Koch brothers and you had $80 billion in wealth and you just saw your wealth increase by $12 billion in the last year, $12 billion in 1 year, under the tyrannical regime of Barack Obama. Now think what they would do if they had a Republican administration. But they did see a $12 billion raise. You ask yourselves, and I think the psychologists have got to deal with this, isn't $80 billion enough? I mean, how much more do you need to take care of your family?
All of it.
That's right. And it would seem to me that if these guys had any sense of decency, they would not be spending huge amounts of money on candidates whose job it is to cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Can you imagine having so much wealth, more money than anybody could dream of, and then they are spending their money not to improve the quality of life of our people, but to attack working people and the middle class? One of the goals of the Koch brothers and others is to lower taxes for the wealthiest people in this country and largest corporations. You should all know that back in 1952, corporations contributed about 32% of the revenue coming into the federal government. Today, the number is less than 10%. 1 out of 4 corporations in this country, profitable corporations, pays zero in taxes. We're losing $100 billion every year because these guys are stashing their money in the Cayman Islands and other tax havens. So I say to the billionaire class and large corporations, you can't run away from America to avoid paying taxes. We are going to demand you start paying your fair share of taxes in this country. I want to say a word about Social Security and the importance of Social Security, and the fact that probably Social Security is the most successful federal program developed in the modern history of this country. A couple of years ago, there was a virtually united Republican Party and some Democrats who wanted to cut Social Security. And what many of us in the Senate did is we reached out to senior groups, to the trade unions, to veterans organizations, to women's organizations, to disability organizations. And we rallied millions and millions of people who made it clear to the United States Congress that you're not going to balance the budget on the backs of the elderly, the children, the sick, and the poor. And right now, we have pushed them back. The goal right now is not to cut Social Security, but what people are appropriately talking about is how we expand Social Security, get better benefits out to the working people who need them. Now, let me conclude my remarks by telling you what we are up against in this election right now. You know, there's been a lot of discussion in the media about the Koch brothers, and I think a lot of people, whether you're conservative, progressive, moderate, people are unhappy about anybody, no matter what their point of view is, spending hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in a campaign. I think we all recognize that is not what American democracy is supposed to be about. But there has been very little discussion about why are the Koch brothers spending so much money? What do they actually believe in? What do they want? Now, interestingly enough, back in 1980, one of the brothers, David Koch, ran for vice president of the United States on the Libertarian Party. And he didn't get a whole lot of votes, but the Libertarian Party established their platform. And I want to read to you just some of what was in that platform, because I believe they haven't changed their views. It is important for you and the American people to understand what it means and why these guys are throwing money against Jeanne Shaheen and other decent candidates all over this country. What do they want? What is their goal? What is their vision for a new America? And let me just quote word for word from their party platform, Libertarian Party platform in 1980. Quote, "We favor the abolition," this is not the cut, "we favor the abolition of Medicare and Medicaid programs." Quote, "We favor the repeal of the fraudulent, virtually bankrupt, and increasingly oppressive Social Security system." They're not talking about cutting Social Security, they're talking about eliminating Social Security. We urge the repeal of federal campaign finance laws and the immediate abolition of the despotic Federal Election Commission. You know what that means? They are not content with Citizens United and having to do independent expenditures. They want to be able to give somebody a check directly. Here's $50 million, here's your script, this is what you say. And that is now, by the way, what the leadership of the Republican Party believes in. For all of you who work in the Postal Service, hear this one. Quote, "We propose the abolition of the governmental Postal Service." Right now, Jeanne and I, and your members of the House, are fighting to raise the minimum wage. But many of you should understand that Republicans, many, not all, but many Republicans in Congress are not only opposing raising the minimum wage, they believe in abolishing the concept of the minimum wage. This is what the Koch brothers said back in 1980. "We support repeal of all law which impede the ability of any person to find employment, such as minimum wage laws." End of quote. You know what that means? If you are in a high unemployment area and your employer says, "Well, I'm going to give you $3 an hour," and you say, "Well, I have no choice, that's it," and no more job protection, no more safety regulations on the workplace. Needless to say, they support the abolition of the Environmental Protection Agency. And this is the last point that I want to read to you. Listen to this one carefully. This is their vision of a new America. Quote, "We oppose all government welfare, relief projects, and aid to the poor programs. All these government programs are privacy-invading, paternalistic, demeaning, and inefficient. The proper source of help for such persons is the voluntary efforts of private groups and individuals." You know what that means in English? Goodbye Head Start. Goodbye unemployment compensation. Goodbye Pell Grants and any federal aid to education. All gone. Their vision of America is where corporate America and the billionaires have it all. And if you are old and sick, maybe somebody will give you some charity so you could deal with your cancer, but you're not going to have Medicare. And if you're poor, maybe a church or a private charity will help you a little bit, but you're not going to have Medicaid. That is their vision of America. Now, what this campaign really is about, it's not just fighting to protect Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid or decent wages or federal aid to education. That's all important. But there is a deeper meaning to what this campaign is about. And let me be very straightforward and tell you what it is. The real issue that we are debating today is whether or not we retain our democratic form of society, whether or not working people have rights and benefits, or whether we move toward an oligarchic form of society in which the economic and political life of this country is controlled by a handful of billionaires. That is what this struggle is about. And I believe from the bottom of my heart that while these guys have more money than you can dream of, while they are prepared to spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to defeat candidates who are standing for working families, I believe when we stand together, we win, because there are a hell of a lot